Um, just on obviously Dynamo's good players and best players of the past 5 years or so, in terms of the players that they have in the Ukrainian national team at the moment, there's obviously Tsygankov, but there's also Vitaliy Mykolenko, who I think is absolutely brilliant as a left wing back. I think he's fun in terms of his potential as a left wing back in a top five European leagues side. Obviously, he's been playing in a back four with Dynamo because obviously the dominance that they have over the rest of the teams in the league, bar Shakhtar, means that you don't have to do as much defending. But I think with his versatility, it makes him an interesting one because he can obviously play left back, he can play left-sided centre back as he has played in the Ukrainian youth teams, and has played this season. It's pretty much 50-50 really, isn't it, how he's split his time this season under Lucescu. So there's clearly something in his game which says that despite that spindly 6'1" frame of his, he can actually play as an athletic fullback or as a centre half. In terms of if he were to get a move similar to Tsygankov, whenever that may be, where would you see him playing in sort of if he did get a move to a top 5 European league? Because I've always had my suspicions. I think that in a back four where maybe you're asked more tactically, where you are exposed a lot more if you dive into tackles too much, I think he could be a bit more exposed in a tougher division.
I guess there is that risk, but I guess his sort of biggest games that he's had, especially at left back, have been in for Ukraine, like the actual senior national team. I went and watched him play against Portugal in a 0-0 draw at the start of 2019, and he basically pocketed Ronaldo that night. Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo is not who he once was, but I mean, still, it was one of those games where it was like a sort of career-defining moment where it's like, oh, this is a watershed. This guy's going to be big. And I think that the best place for him to go to would be Serie A to start off with, because obviously a sort of an experienced coach might be able to sort of help him with that fullback duality of playing in defence and in attack at the same time. As you've said, he's played in centre-back a number of occasions. That's definitely not his first choice position. It's just if required, if there's injuries or something like that. But he's great at crossing. He's up and down that left-hand side consistently, heaps of energy and pace. And I think he's, I think he's got what it takes. I just think he just needs a bit more, probably more consistent playing time against better, wide men, and maybe that might help him in terms of his experience with those defensive frailties.
Yeah, I think that's the case. When you have seen him up against better players, I actually remember watching that Ukraine-Portugal game back when I was because Mykolenko, funnily enough, was another player that I profiled last summer, and I'd been sort of fighting for him for quite a while. But what I really liked about him was that if Ronaldo tried to drag him into a more isolated position in sort of these lateral spaces, which sometimes fullbacks are not great at covering, fullbacks who can play in central defence maybe aren't as comfortable when they're more isolated. I thought he held up really well in that regard, and I think that's something which will always stand him in good stead. Again, if you're a team who want to buy a left back who is effectively, with good coaching, as you say, I think that's very important, the coaching element, but someone who has the potential to be a very, very effective two-way presence at fullback, which, as we know, the position on the pitch is becoming more and more important nowadays. Being able to be solid defensively, good one-on-one, but also able to affect the game in the final third. And obviously his crossing is fantastic. He's got that great athletic ability. So I think he's one who I think has definitely got a very high ceiling as well.